Well, Esther, it's so great to have you joining me on the Nothing is Wasted podcast. Thanks for being here.
It's so great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I would love for you to, we've got a mutual friend, one of our team members, Amy, and that's how we got connected to you. But I would love for you to tell us a little bit about who you are, kind of help our community get to know you, where you're from, what your family's like, all of that. And, maybe give us a little insight into your relationship with Amy and all of, and then we'll dive back into your story.
Sure. So my name is Esther Lee, and I am from Chicago, Illinois. And I live here with my husband, Mike, and our 4 kids. One is in heaven. We'll be talking about her in just a minute. I have, so she's forever 8 years old. Her name was Ava Bright Lee. I have an 11-year-old. Her name is Gwyneth. And then a 7-year-old, Jude, or Jude David when I'm mad at him. I'm yelling for him. Liv, Ray. And we also have a dog, Pippin. And so we are just currently working and serving in the north part of Chicago, actually only about 10 minutes from where the mass shooting was just a few weeks ago. And so, we know Amy, or I know Amy, because we have both had similar journeys in grieving. She lost her baby boy, Hudson, and I lost my girl, Ava. And so we connected, I think, through, she says that she stalked me and she found me, but I think we just had lots of mutual stories to tell. And we were able to connect that way. And she's just been such a lovely friend to me and just doing amazing things with her grief. And so I'm just so proud of her. Yeah. And I'm so happy to be here, invited to speak with you, Davey, and to help others that are going through similar paths of pain.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you even right now, you even bring to mind just the importance of that community, that solidarity, having those other people who have walked through the same thing that you have walked through, or a similar thing, right? All of our journeys are unique, but at least being able to have some of those Me Too conversations and how powerful and healing that has been. Can you even give us right now some insight into that before we dive into your story? Just how important has that been for you to have those other people that you can lean in on during this?
Oh, it's been so important. I think that very few people can understand this type of deep pain. But I found that strangers, even if we're strangers, when we're connected by a bond like this, it's like instant family. I like to say, right? It's even more. It's a deeper connection than maybe even some of my best friends from prior to going through this. They're amazing, but people who have experienced it, you don't have to say too much for them to understand exactly where you're at, and exactly how difficult it is and how difficult it's going to be.
Right.
But to have each other, you don't feel alone. And I think that's one of the biggest parts of grieving, is that you do feel like a lonely little island, even with a spouse, because spouses, men, they just grieve differently than the way that you might, and vice versa. I think women grieve differently from men. And so to have that space of whether it's, same gender or whether it's a community of believers, it's just really important to have people who can, who have been through pain and can understand, what it does to you and how to overcome it. Yeah.
That's so good. As you're talking about this, I'm even thinking about, I had a conversation with a friend of mine who traveled with me just recently on a speaking engagement. And we were talking about the importance of those kind of different aspects or different facets of community. It's important, like if you're a married couple, it's really important to find other couples that you can have community with that are safe, that's safe community. It's also in that really important to find that like same gender type community as well, where it's just like, just the guys. And we're really talking about some of the things that are unique to our journeys, right? And then also, you're, as a married couple, if you are a couple, then to have that kind of community with each other as well. And when it comes to grieving, how much more important it is to be able to have each one of those pockets of community and the different types of just insights and the different types of, how God, the character of God gets breathed into you through those different types of community that others, if you just have one, right? If you just are doing this thing in one of those facets, it doesn't necessarily give you the full picture of what God wants to bring you in this.
Yeah, agreed. I think we did more of that, like same gender in the beginning, just because we couldn't find anyone that was like in the same spot that we were in. But slowly God brought different people into our lives that could really minister to us, that have gone through similar things. For example, my husband is a pastor, and when this happened, he took a sabbatical. After Ava passed away, he took a sabbatical for a year, and in his place, we hired another pastor who kind of ministers to different churches during their time of need. And the really unique thing was that this pastor, he was probably about 20 years older than us, but he had gone through a very similar journey with his family. They had lost their son. He was older, but in a very similar way with cancer and all of that. And he was able to minister to our church in a very particular way, but he was also able to minister to us in a very, very unique way. And he brought so much insight into the way that we grieve and how to understand each other, and the wisdom that he gave us during our times of meeting with him are invaluable to us. And one of the things he said was, when a couple, experience something like this, they're going to have such a different way of processing it. And he said the number one thing is to give each other grace and space to do it the way that they need to do it. And so that was a very important lesson because they say that, especially in the cancer journey, when you have lost a little, a young one, that things start to fall apart. And this is actually what her oncologist told us. And he's not a social worker, he's not a counselor, he's not a pastor, but he said, when this happens, he was getting us ready for Ava's departure. He said, when this happens, you have to be on the same page, because what typically happens for the majority of people is that you lose, you lose your home, you lose all your savings, and then you lose each other. And so that was a real stark, reminder of what can happen if we don't pull together. So we've really enjoyed having not just enjoyed, but really needed the community of believers to surround us, especially those that were going through very similar things.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, you're bringing up so many important things to light, that loss, it's absolutely devastating. Like the actual loss, the loss of Ava, if you're listening to this, the loss of a child, the loss of a spouse, the loss of a parent, the loss of a sibling, the loss of a loved one, loss of a friend. It's absolutely devastating. And there are subsequent losses that usually follow.
Yeah.
That really, I found that those are some of the more difficult ones to recover from. Esther, as we work with people who have experienced loss, if they're just experiencing that initial loss, I feel a lot more hopeful, because I'm like, we can get through this. We can get through this. But the more subsequent losses that follow, the more, I don't want to say my hope erodes, because the Lord is the God of the impossible, but the more I'm like, this is going to be very difficult. And so I say that to highlight again the importance of community, because as we listen to your story, we'll dive into that here in a second, but as we listen to your story, I have a feeling that this theme of community is going to keep popping up. And so it's important to, that people, that you, if you're not currently in a valley, to gather around those who are in the valley. And if you are currently in a valley, to make sure that you have people that are gathering around you to support you in these spaces, so that these subsequent losses don't have as much of an impact.
Right.
So that you're able to worry and concern yourself with the healing from the initial loss, whatever that looks like. Incidentally, Esther, Amy is among many roles in our organization. She's the community director, and that's why she's so passionate about exactly what you've experienced firsthand with her, connecting with other people and helping other people connect with each other who have walked through similar journeys. And so that's why she's doing that. She's so good at it. And so, I would just say this just as a pause. If you are looking for that community, make sure that you get connected on our Nothing is Wasted community platform, because there are so many people who are there who are also looking for other people who've walked through a similar journey. And you're going to be able to gather a lot of insight and wisdom and just hope from those folks. Esther, let's dive back into your story. Obviously, we've now heard that you lost Ava, that she was 8 years old. But why don't you take us kind of back to what you would deem the beginning of that journey?
Okay, great. So Mike and I met in college. We went to different colleges. I went to the U of I, University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, which is like south, and he went to Moody Bible Institute. But we were able to connect through our home church. And so we dated and we were just madly in love. So we got married, and everything was just wonderful. I should backtrack and say I had a very lovely childhood. My parents were lovely parents. I grew up in a lovely way. And I was raised in the faith, and I just had so many things to be thankful for. And I remember by the time I got married, I just wanted that to continue, all of that goodness to just follow. And I knew we were going into the ministry, but I thought, well, we could, serve God and still have a nice life, and pleasant. And I wasn't expecting anything extravagant. I just wanted a good life, why not have, healthy children. And I didn't even think about my children having to be healthy. I just assumed we'll have healthy children, right? We'll just have, we will serve God, and it will be hard, but he will provide, and we'll always feel fulfilled. And just all of these expectations that I didn't think were too grand. I just thought, this is just, just a little bit, God, why can't I have
the
that? The
cross that I'm going to carry is the difficulty of ministry.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I can totally relate to that. Yep.
Yes. And that's difficult enough. So give me some grace here. Right?
That's good. So the rest of my life needs to be pretty easy. It needs to be smooth sailing, because this is going to be
So you said it. Easy, good, and that's kind of what I wanted, and so married Mike, and we had that. We had a really great beginning to our marriage. He was serving. I'm a teacher. I didn't mention that earlier, but I am a teacher by profession. And so I was teaching, and I was happy. And then we found out we were pregnant with Ava, and I was ecstatic. I remember finding out and not wanting to tell Mike, because I wanted it just to be a secret between me and this baby and God. And I remember walking home one day, and I was just talking to her, and I was like, only I know about you, only God and I know about you right now. And you're so precious, and I love you so much. And you're going to have a good life. And I remember just having this conversation with her, and then sharing it with Mike, and just doubling that joy of this birth that was to come. And so it was beautiful. We had her on August 14th, 2008. It was a muggy summer day, but we couldn't be happier as new parents. And we brought her home, and we named her Ava Bright Lee, because I pondered her name for a very long time. I love words, and I love meaning, the meaning behind words. And so I thought about it, and I thought, Ava means life, and bright means just, filled with light. And I just wanted her to have a bright life. And so that's what we named her. Yep. And we brought her home, and we began the journey of parenting her. And it was so awesome and so amazing. She was a really easy baby. She was a really easy baby, temperamentally, but physically she had quite a few issues that we didn't really know about until a little bit more into our journey with her. So around 6 months, she started to kind of get a rash every time she nursed. And I remember I had a friend who had a baby with a really severe eczema patch. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, that seems hard. I feel bad, and so when she started to get these rashes, I remember thinking, oh no, oh no,
Yeah.
I hope it's not that type of severe
Right.
eczema. And sure enough, it was. It was the kind where it's just weeping and sore, and when she
Wow.
sleeps, like her shirt or her whatever, her mitten would get stuck to her shirt or her face from all the pus and all of that stuff. So it was
Yeah.
really terrible eczema, and we come to find out at about the 1 year mark that she had severe food allergies, which was
Wow.
causing all of these rashes. Because as I was nursing her, I was eating just normally, and so I started cutting out all of these foods, um, and then we came to find that she actually had really severe food allergies. It wasn't just
Wow.
like we should stay away from the dairy because it gives her gas. It was like if she eats dairy, she will have an anaphylactic reaction, and
Oh,
she
wow.
could die. And so we found that she had actually many more than just dairy. It was dairy, egg, nuts, shellfish. It was
Wow.
all of these other ones. Wheat was another big
Wow.
one. Wheat
Wow.
was actually her biggest one, which is,
Right.
if you have celiac, you can
Yep.
know that it's really hard to totally get rid of
Right.
that,
Right.
and you'll have traces everywhere.
Right.
And so that began
That's so
a
hard.
new season, right, of just food allergies, and making sure that she didn't have anything that she couldn't have. And it became really difficult because the cross contamination aspect of her allergies
Yeah.
was way more than a typical person with allergies. So I tell this story of how one time I was making her like her special like rice pasta, and I was making my wheat pasta next to it, and I just kind of forgot. I forgot that I had to use a different utensil. I had 2 utensils to mix it. So I mixed it with the same utensil, and I was like, oh no, oh well, it should be okay. It's just, I
Yeah.
just mixed it once, and I was going to rinse the pasta and all that. So I rinsed it. I gave it to her. She had such a huge reaction
Oh,
from
no.
just that
Right.
amount of cross contamination that she required 3 EpiPens.
Oh, my
And
goodness.
on the way to the hospital, we thought we would lose her because her oxygen was
Wow.
tanking, and her anaphylactic, she was in full shock. And so those are the types of things that we dealt with, probably 4 or 5
Wow.
anaphylactic reactions a year,
Yeah.
that we had to kind of, and so the trauma of
Goodness.
that, just every
Absolutely.
time I would hear an ambulance, I would be like, oh my
Right.
gosh, is that like, and when I would drive home from work, is that like an ambulance going to my house because my
Yeah.
mom called? And,
Oh, man.
and actually, Davey, there were times when I was following the ambulance home and it was going to my house. So, yeah, just the trauma of,
Yeah.
is this child going to make it
Living in that fear
into
almost
adulthood?
every day.
Fear,
Yeah.
so much fear. And so that's kind of the backstory of how, we, the things that we had to go through. This
Right.
is even before her diagnosis. And so, we're getting, older. She's now 4, she's turning, 5, and we have that wheat incident around the time that she was 5.
Yeah.
And so we're on high alert, and we're just getting ready for the other shoe to fall. And miraculously, her allergies start to taper off, or actually her reactions start to taper off. So we don't see as many reactions.
Right.
Her skin is clearing up. We're thinking, oh my goodness, God is answering our
Yeah.
prayer. Like,
Yeah.
she is actually maybe going to get better. Maybe she's going to go
growing out of
outgrow
this.
some of these.
Yeah, this is great.
Right. So that's what we were thinking. And then this is kind of around the winter time. In February of 2014, she started to have like these little bites all over her body. And she would come up to me and she'd say, Mom, I have these little mosquito bites. And I didn't paint enough of a picture of Ava yet, which I hope to do, but she was just the most beautiful child. She had faith very early on. She was so content. She was so articulate. She was so polite and kind. And just prior to her telling me about these little mosquito bites, I remember her saying Mom, my shoes are getting a little tight. But if you don't have time to get me new shoes, that's okay. I can just, I think I could, if I don't wear socks, I can wear them. And I remember feeling so bad.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Because she's so sweet. And I was so caught up. I had just transitioned into a new position, and I was so caught up in my work That was kind of the premise why she didn't want to bother me. She was like, if you get a chance to buy me new shoes, she's 5 years old.
Oh,
and she's like such a sweetheart. And so again, she was like, I have these little bites. And I said, oh honey, like, I don't know why you have mosquito bites in the middle of winter, but do they itch? And she's like, no. And so I just kind of disregarded it as I don't really know, but I don't really have time and it doesn't seem that serious. And so it was kind of one of those things. And then she had some joint pain. And so I brought it up to her pediatrician and they're like, well, this is the exact time around, the time when they start to get some growing pains. And so you really shouldn't worry about it. So all of that was brushed under the rug. But in February, she came down with some very high fevers. And so we were very concerned. And she also had like a lesion, like a skin lesion on her leg. And so we thought, maybe the doctor thought maybe it's MRSA because she does get some skin reactions. And so they put her on some antibiotics and the antibiotics weren't clearing her fever. So she had persistent fevers for about 5 days. And finally they're like, just bring her in. She has to get admitted because we can't have her having like 105-degree fevers at home. And so we brought her in, just another typical day in the hospital. We've been in and out so many times in her life and brought her in and they took some blood work and they came back and they said, I think we have to retest her because her white blood count is off the charts. It's in the 100,000s. And so we were like, oh my goodness, we hope that we didn't really understand what that meant, but we're like, well, we hope that it's nothing big and just a mistake in the lab. And so we held her down again. And I remember being really annoyed, like, you guys messed up. Now I have to get her, another needle stick and come to find that would be the least of our worries. One little prick in her arm because she was diagnosed with leukemia, in February of 2014. And so that was the beginning of it all. And man, what a journey it was.
Well, already leading up to that, you guys were, like you said, there was a lot of trauma associated with her early childhood. And then, you have probably this sense of relief thinking that everything now is, she's outgrowing this and this is okay. Everything's going to start kind of working itself out and going to normal. And then you have this huge news that's dropped on you. And I can't imagine the weight and the impact of that news. What was that like as you guys are receiving this diagnosis? I mean, where were you at? Did you feel a sense of hopelessness? Was it something that was just, how are we going to get beyond this? Or was there still some fight in your spirit or what? I'm sure there's a mixture of all of those things, but what were you feeling in those moments?
Yeah. I think that you mentioned earlier, living in that fear. And I think that, just my natural, nature is to be kind of like a fearful person. And that is actually my biggest fear is losing a child. And once I became a mom, that's what I realized was my biggest fear. And I know this because my friend, prior to Eva being diagnosed, my friend's daughter was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I was praying for her daughter, and she had posted this one entry about how her daughter had relapsed. And so the doctor was saying there's a 10% chance of survival. And she asked us to rally around her and pray. Wow. And I remember getting this news and I was in my bed.
Wow.
And I just fell to the floor. I just fell face down on the floor. And I remember crying out to God and saying, how could that be? How could you let a daughter die? And so I was pleading for this family, and my heart was just broken. It wasn't my child, but it could have been because I was so broken over the news. And so I remember crying out to God and saying, you know what? I could never do that. I could never bury my child. You mark my words, God. That's the one thing please don't challenge me with, because I could never do it. And so I remember praying that. And then in February, Ava was diagnosed. And so when I got the news from the doctors, even that felt like being almost teased, because there are different multiple types of leukemia, some better prognosis than others.
Yeah.
And we had been diagnosed on a weekend. And so there's bare bones staff in a hospital on the weekends.
Yeah.
And so they had told us, oh, we're pretty sure it's the one that everyone gets. And it's, 95% cure rate. We think she's going to be okay. Like, I know it's scary, but like, just hang in there. We think we'll take good care of her. And then that was like Friday night, and then Saturday comes and they're like, oh, we actually did some more tests and it actually looks like the more aggressive type of leukemia. So, at this point, if you need to move to a bigger hospital, we understand. So that night we transferred her to the bigger hospital in Chicago. And then that staff came in on Sunday and they were like, we did more tests and this is actually a mix of both types of leukemia. It's very, very rare. Only 3% of the whole leukemic population, including adults and children, get this type of leukemia, and the prognosis is very poor.
Wow.
And I heard that, and I went into the quiet room, and I just let out a shriek that just like resonated through all the halls, and it almost felt like everyone just quieted down because they were like acknowledging this grief that was happening as we thought about the idea of losing Ava. And so that's how I felt. And I was on the floor at a different point during that day. I was just constantly on the floor, like on this grimy hospital floor. And I remember this voice over me. I was weeping, and in the sitting room because I didn't want to alarm Eva, and I was weeping, and this voice over me touching my shoulder, and this voice and this woman was saying, Dios es bueno, Dios es bueno, which is God is good, God is good. And I look up and it's this woman and she is saying this to me. And I remember thinking like, how can you say that? Like, how can you say that in this instance? Like, I just got the diagnosis that my daughter may very well die. And I'm thinking these things, of course. And of course, to her, I'm saying, thank you so much. And later, I found out that she actually had a child, Angel, on the same floor with cancer. And she had a paraplegic son, probably like a young adult. Her husband would push her paraplegic son into the hospital to visit his brother Angel, who had cancer. And this mom is telling me God is good. And so, wow, the power of those words coming from someone who has gone through it was phenomenally more than anyone that can offer that platitude to me, that hasn't gone through pain. And so again, back to that community, like when you have someone who has gone through similar things, they're the ones that can minister to you because there's power behind the words. They've lived, breathed those words. They tested those words and they found that those words are true. And so, that just began, it was a 3-year fight, very long. I would do it over again in a heartbeat if it meant she was still here. But that was our journey of pain where God was like, I'm not going to give you an easy life, but I'll give you a sanctified life. And I think that's how I'm here.
Wow. That's true.
Yeah.
I feel like, we all just need to pause for a second and just, acknowledge the weight of what you guys have walked through. And in that moment with this lady that's speaking this over your life, there's so many profound things within that. The fact that her child, her name is Angel, and here's this, for all intents and purposes, this angel that's putting her hand on your shoulder and speaking words of life into you, and all you're thinking about is the very opposite. All you're thinking about is the potential of death. And it's really amazing what you pointed out there, that it's one thing to hear that platitude from someone who maybe just comes to visit you in the hospital and awkwardly doesn't really know what to say, and so they feel like they have to just kind of say the right thing. It's a
Right.
whole other thing
Right.
to hear it from someone who is walking it, because you know that behind that comes a lot of wrestling, a lot of struggle, and a lot of really big revelations and insights and mysteries of the character of God that are only revealed through these dark nights of the soul.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to say God is good is a huge statement with a lot of depth to it, spoken in the right moment by the right person.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And, you know, there are folks who are listening to this and they would say the same exact thing that your heart was saying in that moment too. How in the world can you say God is good? And, you know, I'm wondering if, I don't want to jump ahead too much, but over the course of, you know, as you look over the course of that 3-year battle, as you look over the course of what ensued, where you know, ended with, you know, your worst fear and having to say goodbye to Ava. I wonder what you feel about those words, God is good. And if you can kind of unpack some of that struggle and wrestling that you had over those years,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. I think the way that I felt, the best way to describe it is I felt like after all of these things unfolded, I felt like I was stabbed in the back by my best friend. You know, I felt like, you know, I committed to a life of serving you, and this is, you know, what I get for it. And I think it revealed a lot about myself, not about God's character, but about what I was expecting from God. Like I said in the beginning, I wanted this, it was almost like a transaction. Like, you know, I will serve you, just give me like a mediocre life. And it showed that like my faith was actually very fragile. It was, I grew up in the faith. I, you know, went to, I was very involved in church and all of these things. But when it came down to it, when I was going through this fire and as everything was melting away, I realized that, wow, like what was in the center needed to be built up, back up again. And so it was so revealing. And now looking back, I realized, my goodness, like I needed that time of fire for me to really understand what I believe.
Wow.
And all the truths that I've been told as a child that I took, but I didn't really own. You know, I took it from my parents, but did I really know it for myself? And all that, all of that fire really revealed cracks in my foundation, not in God's. And so, how did I wrestle through God is good? I mean, I think the most interesting thing is my mentor through all of that was Ava.
Wow.
And she firmly believed God was good to her. And I don't know how she had that faith, but it was a childlike faith, which is why God, I think, you know, directs us to come as a child, one who can trust in their parent, even when things don't seem right. And so, yeah, what's my journey like? I think that I feel like that suffering was really a necessary part of my life. I think that it revealed to me that my life is not my own. It revealed to me that that when I am able to, you know, relinquish my rights to this good life, to this thing, to that, I can see much more of what God has in store for my life, because it's not about me being happy, but it's about, you know, our holiness, and it's about us drawing near to God and becoming more like Christ. And I think that, and I'm not the camp like team suffering. Everyone needs to be sanctified through the fire. I just think that sometimes those seasons, God uses those seasons to draw us closer to Him. And it just seems so crazy. Like, why would something so hard draw us to Him? But it's because in those times, like, we have no one to rely on. Like, what human could offer us comfort when we have lost a loved one, And I think of your story, and I think of what comfort could you gain from any words that anyone can say, except from the very words of God that hold the hope that we long for. And so, one of the instances of when God really revealed Himself to me was when I was, interestingly enough, on the hospital bathroom floor. And I would put Ava to bed, and I would just go into the bathroom so she couldn't hear me. And I would just fall down on the floor and I would weep before God. And it was this dirty, not that dirty because it's a hospital, but yes, dirty, dirty but clean. You know what I mean? And so I would be on this hospital floor, and it became not just a hospital floor, but it became this holy ground where I was meeting with God. And I think a lot of my life, I thought, God is up there and I am down here. And I petitioned this way, and God hears me, but like he's far away, and maybe He's even judging me, like, oh, you of little faith, oh, Esther, like, you can't even go through a trial like this, like, oh, you're much weaker than I thought. Like, no, like, I found Him on that bathroom floor with me, weeping with me over the brokenness of my situation, over the brokenness of this world, over the loss that I would endure. Because I think as a parent, when I think about my mom, and we were going through the receiving line after Ava died, my friend said that she was walking through and she greeted my mom, and my friend knows my mom, and my mom just clung to her and said, Ava's with God now, but what about my daughter? What's going to happen to her? My heart breaks for her. And I think about God on that bathroom floor with me, embracing me, not judging me, not saying, oh, you're so weak, but saying, oh, my heart breaks for what you have to go through. Embracing me, rocking me, and being so close with me, and maybe even just huddled on the floor with me, and I never got to see that side of God before because I didn't really need it like that, and I would have missed out so much on the character of God had I not gone through this. And not to say that this is worth my suffering, like, because I don't think anything is worth the suffering. But what Amy had said to me is, she had ministered to me, and she said, nothing is worth our suffering, but God is worth it all. And yes, drawing near to God was worth it. So yes, that's how I saw glimpses of God and His goodness in my life, even through that really difficult, painful time.
Yeah. That's one of the greatest, and Esther, thank you for sharing that, because I think there's a couple things there that are so important for all of us to really experience through you and be reminded of. And that is just the ever-present nature of God, and that is so all-consuming and soul-satisfying that nothing else can replace that. And I have such a confidence in God showing up for people now because of how He showed up for me in those very personal moments. It's, as you said, as your mom is so concerned about you, rightfully so, right? That's so many people's concern. And yet there's such an assurance to know that God is carrying you, that the Father is, like you said, huddled with you on the bathroom floor. And now I have such a confidence in that when I'm helping people, and I feel less the need to say the right words to somebody or to try to, impart something to them. I'm just like, Lord, you have to do what only you can do. And that experience with Him, like what you've experienced in the presence of God, and though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. That right there, that moment is so profound and healing. Those moments are so profound and healing, and it galvanizes something. It galvanizes a strength, a trust that allows you to walk through whatever's next. And so I trust in that so much. I want to bring that to light and say, that's where God meets us in those moments, as we open up our heart and as we do what you did, where you entered into grief and limit. You weren't afraid of that. You took those things to God in your desperation and in your anger, in your whatever, a fear, all of those things that you were feeling. You took it to the Lord, and then He met you in that space. And He's faithful to do that with all of us.
Yes.
And then I think, the other thing, just as you were talking, I was just thinking about just that concept of it being worth it. That's such it's such a there's a tension there, right? There's like pulling apart that it feels like two mutually exclusive concepts where we go, I never would want to have walked through this.
That's right.
And at the same time, I would never want to trade what I have right now with the Lord.
Right.
And somehow those two things work together in tandem, which, as we talk about in the Pain and Purpose course, the power of and. Somehow we're able to express both of those things. And those of us who have lost in these extreme ways, we get it. We understand it. We're like, I agree. I feel the same way.
Yeah. Agreed. I think that what we have gained from our loss is priceless. I think it really is priceless. I think that we wish, if I could go back and I've said this before, like so many people have said to me, like Ava's death, it really has ministered to me and brought me closer to Jesus. And I remember saying, I actually don't care about your walk with Jesus. Like, you need to figure out your own walk with Jesus. Don't, I don't want my daughter's sacrifice to be your gain, and I remember thinking no one's worth it. And, but that really brought me back to even Jesus in a new light, like, my God, like the Father's heart to love us, to willingly sacrifice. I would not willingly ever sacrifice for anybody. My child? No, that's not, you're not worth it. But the way that God loves us, all of these things, all of these scriptural truths we have read, we have known, but to actually own them because you have tested them is just a new, it's a new walk with God in the sense that we can really say, I know you, and I know you better than I've known you before, and I want to know you more. And so I think that is, again, like there's nothing that can make this loss okay, but knowing that God is, I don't mean to sound trite, but that God is in control of our story, and that He's molding us, and that this is a very temporary life. Like those kinds of things help me to see that even this loss that I have is not just what meets the eye. It's not like this tragic story and cancer and all this stuff. But I often think about how when I get to heaven and I say to God, why did you take Eva? You didn't have to. It was one word, and she would have been healed. But why would you allow that? And I think that's what I'm going to say. That's what I think would be, my response. But when I really think about it, I don't think that's going to be my response at all. I think when I get there, I'm going to say, wow, I didn't know that that's what was happening in the background of our stories, that you were creating this tapestry that we would never have been able to would never have been able to envision,
Right.
or our minds
Right.
be able to wrap around what you were doing. And so this trust now
Yeah.
that he's doing something, I think is what propels me forward and helps me to find purpose when, quite frankly, I would rather die. Davey, there were many days where I was like,
Yeah.
well, why am I still waking up? Like, why am I still alive?
Yeah.
It's almost like after Eva died, I felt like all of all of my limbs were just severed. And how could I walk again? Like, how could I actually do this when I am disabled? How can I run this race? How can you put me back into the fight and be like, okay, now that this happened, go back and now serve me more. I'm like, no, like that's cruel. How can I do that? But just to know that, like, even though I'm just crawling or I'm just, I'm just existing, those types of things are giving, that God is proud of those moments of us just getting up every day and like just putting forth what we can is enough. And he's proud of that. And I don't know, I think I might be going off track, but like all of these things I'm like wrapping my head around.
Yes. Yep. And all of those things they're so beautiful. They're so real. It's exactly, I agree with that 100%, that he's proud of those little moments. And I think it's so important that we're reminded of that. I mean, there are people, gosh, you're listening to this and you are literally facing, or you have just faced the worst, most horrific thing you could ever imagine. And you need to hear Esther say, this is what I've felt, because you're feeling the exact same thing. I remember it. I remember having to fly down to South Carolina and get, some pretty intense counseling. And I remember there being some turbulence as we were going, into the landing. And I was just like, Lord, I just want you to take me now, like just like this plane wreck. And I don't want to, and I honestly, I've never encountered this before. I really did not care to be alive anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that is a common experience with those of us who have experienced this kind of horrific loss. And it's also really, really powerful for all of us to hear you say that, Esther, because that's not where you are right now. That's not how you feel right now. You've been working through and wrestling through quite a bit, and you're not healed.
Yeah.
Right? But you're every day continually healing.
Yeah.
And God's bringing these new insights of his character and nature into your life.
Yeah.
Can you point to some things, over the, first of all, from a timeline standpoint, how long ago was this now that you lost Ava?
It's been 5.5 years going on.
5.5
6.
years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I do want to also point that out. It's still very tender.
Yeah.
And even as you're sharing this, like I can see there's like healing that's happening in you, but there's also these very tender, raw moments, right? Obviously the emotion that you're showing and the emotion that you're drawing out of us too, as we're listening to this. But I think that's a point to encourage people with. There's these waves of grief. And I wonder if you'd speak to that a little bit, that, you're like many of us, where you're reminded of this loss constantly. And there's some days you probably feel like, okay, life's kind of back to normal. And then other days you're faced with the stark reality that it's not. And this grief just kind of comes up. Can you describe that a little bit, and how you deal with that, how you work through that?
Yeah. I probably don't work through it very helpfully in a very healthy way. I think the way that I normally do it is I just distract myself. I think that was a lot of how I dealt with Ava's. I would distract, get busy, I need it, right? I need to find purpose. What's my purpose? And so I'm constantly looking for purpose, constantly dissatisfied that I haven't found the thing that I'm supposed to do out of this pain. And I'm just, I'm ragging on myself, and I'm trying to get myself as distracted as possible. And then the wave, it always will come. It will come, and it hits, and I'm floored. And a lot of times that looks like I'm just, like I need to lay down and I need to be like out for a long time. And other times, I write and I write, and that's how I get everything out. And even the things that I didn't even know that I was feeling, I draw, it gets drawn out of me. And I think that is a lot of the Holy Spirit, like working in me to help me to process and to think about what actually it is. And so I think, a lot of times, especially now, I can say, if someone asks, how are you doing? I think I could say, oh yeah, I'm good. You know, like I'm doing this and that. But if I'm very honest, I'm not good. You know, I'm not, it's not always well within my soul. I think many times it is, but it's not always.
Wow.
And that's the truth. And I think that that is okay. Like, I think as being in ministry, people are always looking to you and you feel like you need to like have it all together. But I think the reason why people actually even read what I write is because I'm very honest that I'm not all together. And maybe I won't even be healed on this side of heaven. And that's okay, because we will be healed one day and we will have that wholeness. And so, how am I working through it? Like I speak to a counselor, I write, I confide in my friends. It just takes one text to the group of girls who have lost their babies for me to feel like I'm not alone again. And so, I try to go on walks. I try to like do whatever I can to feel connected with God again, because really, what can really give us peace? You know, it's God. Like he says, my peace I give unto you. It's a peace that the world cannot know. And so truly, who can give us peace? It's God. And so one thing, Davey, that I actually learned from Ava is to worship when it's really, really hard. And she didn't, of course, she was like, let me teach you a lesson, Mom. Here's what I do when I'm sad. She was just, 7. She was 8 when she died, but 7, 6, 7 when she was going through all of the treatments. And I recall this one treatment. It was her skin. She had to have skin radiation. And remember how I told you she had those little dots on her skin? That was actually another complication to her leukemia, which was very rare. It was called leukemia cutis, which is leukemia in the skin. And so she also had leukemia in the skin. And so they were just teeny little dots, but enough cells, leukemic cells, to have her relapse if we didn't take care of it. And so at one point in her treatment, we needed to have her skin radiated. And this is something that we went to Northwestern for. They had never done it in their department. They had never done this type of treatment on a child. And so they had to order all of these equipment just for this. And Ava was 6, but she was like small in stature. So she was tiny. And so they had to take these exact measurements, get these like small little, equipment that they had to order, what's that word? Custom order. And so here she is in this room that no one else is allowed to be in, because if you are in the same room, not let alone getting zapped by it, but if you're just in the same room, it's toxic to you. You can't be there. So what do? We put her in this apparatus where she actually has to stand. So she's standing, and I'll share a picture with you maybe if I can later, but she's standing and she has to do all these little angles. And so she has to stand still for, 30 seconds at a time. And they also have to put goggles on her eyes that block out all the light because they want to protect her eyes. So if you can imagine, now you're in this room by yourself, this cold room. You're 6 years old, 7 years old. She's holding this apparatus. She has to stand still. And they're like, please be very, very still, or else this is going to, it's going to damage other parts of your body. So all this responsibility. She's blind. And I remember she said to me, Mama, I'm scared because I can't see anything. And I said, Ava, I'm so sorry. Like, this is what we need to do. And she said, I understand. So she's in the room. We all leave the room. And what does she start doing? She starts singing. And so she's singing. And she's singing all these songs by herself. And she's like, Mommy, I'm scared. And we can only talk through a one-way radio. Oh, sorry, two-way radio. So I'm saying, honey, it's almost done. And she's like, okay. And so she continues to sing. And she had been doing this all throughout her her journey. And up to the very last day, one of the last things she did, one of the last videos I have of her is her singing. And she's singing, I think it was Silent Night because it was Christmas. And you see her every breath, like the lungs are now like filled with leukemic cells. And she's just searching for every single breath as she sings out this song. And I remember thinking, like, why would you waste your breath on praising God? Like, take a break, and I could just imagine her saying to me, like, how could I not? How could I not? Praise God, and so when I think about worship, I think about it transporting me. Maybe it did this for her too, transporting me out of my present situation into the presence of God. And when I'm in the presence of God, all I'm filled with is gratitude, awe, hope. And so worship to me is key, and it's hard to do. It's like your hands feel like they're like with your broken hands, you're trying to lift them up so that you can praise the one who created you. And it's a difficult practice, but one that is so necessary for us to be connected with God and to understand where we stand in relation to him, but also how much he loves us and where we stand in relation to him, in a sense, right? We stand here, but really he's brought us through Jesus up here in his presence. And so I don't mean to get like all like, whatever, preachy or whatever, but this is like what has been helpful to me. And also I still struggle with grief and just depression. So is that possible to not be whole, but be praising God? Yes. Yeah. And I hope that we can all do that. I don't know.
Yeah. Wow. Esther, I don't have any words after that. I really don't. That was powerful. Just a powerful reminder of the presence of God.
Yeah.
And there's no replacement for that.
Yeah.
I'm just so moved by just a little bit of breath in Ava's lungs as she's worshiping and giving that breath back to God. You're like, wow. There's something so stirring and moving about that, which makes, it just reminds me, like, I think of it in like a video reel, like I imagine this, I imagine like as a movie, and it doesn't matter if you believe in God or if you don't, if you trust the Lord or you don't. It doesn't matter if you are a Christian or a skeptic. You're moved by that, and I think that is testimony to the fact that eternity is written on our hearts, and we all deep down know that there is something else that is transcendent of all of this. Right? There's a sovereign being who really holds all of this. And as difficult as all of this is in life and loss and everything we're experiencing, that he is a good father.
Yeah.
And he is all powerful. And somehow the fact that he is all powerful and this suffering still exists in this world and in our lives, somehow it still can be reconciled that he is good.
Yeah.
And that is the journey that we're on and the little destinations that we have arrived at, you have these moments where you're like, okay, he's good. He can be trusted. And then you have these moments where you're the outworking of trying to figure out, are you good in all of this?
Right.
And, to me, that's what grief looks like. That's the journey, at least grief with the Lord. And then he's faithful to show up and show you that he is good.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to be, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt you there.
Well, I just want to be clear that I have not arrived, and my grief is still very messy, and it's
Yes.
okay to be
Yes.
messy. And I think that's the message that believers need to hear, because coming from a very like strict, like my,
Right.
background of like how it's supposed to look, like
Yep.
grieving as a Christian, you should only have hope and it should be
Yeah.
fine. And God, you have God. And so it's, it should be better, and really it's a mess, and it's
Right.
okay,
Right.
because I think God acknowledges that we live
Yeah.
in a very broken world. And I think he's just honored by like I said, our efforts to just like
Yeah.
not die. Like, I don't know how else to put it, but like
Right.
our
How do I
efforts
keep
to
living?
not die.
How do I get up to
exactly just surviving. And I think
Wow.
he's pleased with that. So I don't want it to seem like, oh yeah, I praise God when I'm like sad. Actually,
No.
it's hard,
Yeah, you're communicating
Yeah.
that you, even when you don't feel like praising God, you're inspired by that, and you're like, okay, Lord, how do I get my heart to that? How do I it's not there, but
Yeah.
I want it to be there. And those
Yeah.
are such pure, genuine prayers and such pure, genuine statements. That's that childlike faith. It's like, I want to acknowledge, I want to be real that I'm not there, but I want to be there, and I don't know how to be there. And so, God, I need you to come in and be sufficient where I'm insufficient. And
Right.
that's letting God do what only he can do. That's Jehovah Rapha. That's the healer, right? That's he does this. And we just have to be submissive, and we have to be clay in the potter's hands, and he's going to do it in his time. And that, that brings me to this, you said this earlier, that you're still trying to figure out and work, like, what is my purpose out of this? Like, what is, and I love that you're stating that, because I just had a conversation with someone who walked through, and you guys will hear it on the podcast, walked through some extreme childhood trauma. And then, like, now it's very clear exactly what she does for a living. They've got this big organization. It's very clear the connection between the trauma that she walked through and how she's helping other people. And then we're like, okay, this is pain to purpose. And yet so many of us and so many of our listeners sit somewhere in the middle of that, where we're going, I know God's got something for me in this, but I haven't discovered that or realized that or walked into it yet. Can you give us a little bit of insight into fresh in your journey right now? What does that look like for you to try to figure that out? What does that look like as you're wrestling through that? What are some things you're learning in, okay, how do I step into what God, the purposes you have for me, or how do I get my heart and mind wrapped around that?
Oh, that is such a good question.
I ask you that because people need to hear you say it now, right? They don't need to hear like, oh, well, yeah, back, 4 years ago when I was wrestling with this.
Yeah.
They need to know, like, this is where many of us are. That's where so many of us are in that space right now.
I don't have an answer for you, because I'm still searching. And it's really funny, because if you look at what I've done since Ava passed, it's just such a mix of like random, I wanted to, maybe I should, because I don't know. I was like, maybe I should go back to teaching. Maybe I should go into real estate. Maybe I should, maybe I should, continue blogging. Davey, I tried to pursue a doctorate. Like, I was just if I get a doctorate, then I can like help, more people, because then I can go in the hospitals and all that to say, I am still searching, but also I'm beginning to start to feel a peace, because I think for so long I was like, what can I create to make it worth it? And I put so much pressure on myself to create something out of my pain. When I think what God wants from me is like, just like the openness to see what he wants from me. Right. And not to put it in my own hands and be like, oh, but I'm running out of time. It's been 6 years. What have I done? But to be open to things like this, like, I'm not really a natural speaker. I'd much rather write something, but when Amy asked, like, part of me was like, oh, okay. But like, like when God gives me those opportunities to share, to have the courage to share and to be confident that he will use it for however he uses it, and not try to be in control of how things are going to turn out. And I think that is my biggest lesson, is to be content in my circumstance, and to know that my pain won't be wasted. Even if I don't make this grand foundation, even if it's that I've talked to one mom and I've helped her not commit suicide, or I've, my blog has helped another mom feel less alone, or, or this podcast has helped someone understand that like grieving is difficult work, and it's okay that you're in the middle of it, even 10 years later. Like maybe those things are enough for me. And I'm a very ambitious person, so it doesn't feel enough.
Well, it sounds like real estate, PhD, like
all over the place.
Right.
But even though I feel like I need to do it, like maybe I'm at a place where I'm content if God just uses the little moments in my life. And that's hard for me to say because again, I want a product.
For sure.
So where will that be? I have no idea, but I think I'm beginning to be open to the fact that I don't have to create it, that it can be created in me. So
well, I think what you're saying is I'm grinning over here because I think what you're saying is one, so powerful, and two, so necessary to articulate because we have so many models of, well, I walked through this, and because of this ministry or this endeavor or this thing spawned out of it. And of course, I know what I'm saying right now because we have this entire platform, this entire ministry called Nothing is Wasted that comes directly from what we've walked through, right? I get it.
Yeah.
And so I understand the struggle of feeling that, of going, I can't waste this. I've got to do this. I'm a very ambitious person too. I'm a very take charge type person. I learned that is part of my personality, even in grief, is that I will tend to go, okay, I'm gonna take charge to do something redemptive out of this. But what I'm learning and what I'm hearing you say is that really redemption, the responsibility of redemption, is the Lord's.
Yeah.
Which can put some of us at a place where we go, well, I don't know, like I want to, but really, if you truly think about it, He is way better at writing stories of redemption.
Yes.
Than we could or will ever be.
Right.
And when we relinquish that control and that responsibility to Him, we can just trust, right? We can trust opportunities that He brings to us. And so He will both bring divine opportunities and He will bring divine vision and revelation at the exact appropriate time.
Right.
And so it's like this John 15, abide in Him, right? And as you are abiding in Him, you're healing. You're getting grafted into this vine as a branch, and you're healing. Yeah. And then out of that, when you abide in Him, all you do is produce fruit.
Yeah.
As Jesus, like as long as you remain in Him, you produce fruit. And then I believe that down the road, you'll kind of see this like the manifestation of some of this fruit.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden the Lord gives you this divine revelation. He's like, boom, I want you to see this. Yep. And I want you to step into this opportunity. And it's something that you could have never written. You could have never fabricated for yourself.
Right.
And it's like, oh, this is redemption. And there's such a beauty in that to know that He's the one that wrote it.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I tell people all the time, God's not going to let you get the credit for your redemption story. He's not going to let you get the credit for that, right? And so just
Thank
walk
God.
in that. Yeah, praise the Lord. Just walk in the fact that He's going to get the credit, so that you look at it and you go, I am awestruck by what you have done.
Right.
I can't believe that you've chosen me for this.
Yeah.
That's the story that God wants to write in all of our stories, all of our lives.
Agreed.
Esther, I have one more question, because you brought up fear as one of those things that you wrestled with beforehand.
Yeah.
Fear of particularly losing a child. And I know for a fact that is one of, if not the greatest fear of many, if not most parents.
Yeah.
And I wonder what you would say if you're having coffee with somebody right now, a young mom, a young couple, who that's their fear. They've expressed that to Esther. I hear stories like yours. I hear stories like other people's, and it just evokes this fear inside of me.
Yeah.
What would you say to them now on this side of your journey?
Actually had a conversation very recently with someone who had shared that was their very real fear, and it produced high anxiety in them. And this person is very close to me, and I just said, if you look at me 5 years ago when I lost Ava, I could see how that would be your biggest fear, because you saw it's your biggest fear, and then you saw it happen to someone you love,
Right.
and then you saw them crumble and fall,
Right.
and you think, my God, I could never,
Yeah.
ever do that. And then I said, but look at the journey that I have taken, and where I'm at now. I'm still alive. I'm still alive. I'm still breathing. I'm still trying my best to be here on this earth and to do something fruitful. And I think really the driving force behind why I can do those things is because of the hope I have in heaven. I mean, once Ava left, like that veil was torn, where it's not like heaven is a different realm and here I am on earth, but really like I can almost touch heaven. Like I can almost sense it right there. And so as I work through this life of mine, and the fears and the anxieties I have, they pale when I think about my eternity with the ones I love, and that's actually what helps me. And that's not what helps everybody, but I think this hope of heaven, my verse that I came away with after all this happened was, I have a hope that's firm, like an anchor.
Yeah.
That's what gets me through the day. And so when I think of heaven, I think of it so entirely differently than the way that I used to think of it. Like, ooh, will I like it there? Is it going to be kind of like boring? I don't know if I just want to sit there and like sing songs. And I read a little bit of Randy Alcorn's book on heaven, and right? And it just like transforms your idea of what that's like. And I often say, like, this world, we think this is our reality, and we're working and working, and we think like heaven is this dream. But like, I think one day we're going to wake up and we're going to realize we'll be, when we die and we wake up in heaven, I think we'll realize, oh my gosh, I just woke up from that terrible dream. And like, now I'm here in my reality. And so that's how I get through each day, honestly. Wow. And that's how my fear is appeased, because really nothing on earth is going to make me feel less fearful of the things that can happen, except for the fact that God has conquered even death, right? Christ has conquered even death. And so really, what have we to fear? We don't have to fear. And so that's what I would say. It doesn't work for everybody, but I think when you have gone through a situation like that, and when you realize that survival is possible, and not only that, but flourishing is possible too. And I think that is a great thing that we miss out on, but it's something that, and I don't think I have time for the story, but it's something that I learned firsthand when I thought about what I wanted for Gwen. Like, what do I want for Gwen, my daughter, who lost her best friend, who lost her mom, quite frankly, for many, many years. That's the effects of cancer, right? You lose and you lose and you lose. And I thought about her life, and I thought, if I were to just sum up her life, like one word I want to give her for her life, like you would think it'd be like broken, or like, barely surviving or whatever. But really, the gift I want to impart to her is flourishing. Like, I want her to flourish in this fire that wrecked everything. But sometimes a fire happens so that new growth can happen too. And so what do I want to give her? I want to give her a life that flourishes on this earth, even though it's a temporary earth and it's a temporary time. God gave us this time to make something of it. And so over fear, I want her to flourish, and I want her to grab onto the reality of heaven, but also be present on earth. And so that's what I would impart to her.
Wow, it's so good. Esther, this has, just been an unbelievable conversation. And I thank you so much for your willingness to share, and just your willingness to be vulnerable and let emotions come out. And you really moved us, all of us, as we're listening to you share this story. And so I'd love for people to get connected to you. Where are spaces that people can connect with you, or maybe if they have questions, or if they want to find some of that solidarity as well, how can they do so?
Sure. So I still write on my Team Brighter Days page. It's a Facebook page that I started for Ava when she was going through her treatments. And so, and I continued to write after she passed. So if you want insight onto how I kind of dealt with the very real emotions of grieving, you can find some of my posts there, and always message me through Facebook. You can email me at estherborali@gmail.com. And I'm always available to chat because that's part of my purpose. I'm realizing is to just help other moms that are going through
It's great.
really difficult times.
It's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for what you're doing. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much, Davey. I appreciate you and everything that you're doing as well. It's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey friend, if you liked this episode, be sure to like and subscribe so that you can stay in the loop every time Nothing is Wasted releases a piece of content here on this YouTube channel.